Looks like it's 6:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started right on time tonight. So good evening. Welcome, class of 2025. Very excited to have all of you here with us tonight and parents as well. This is our annual college kickoff that we as counselors very much look forward to each year. My name is Allison Lockridge. I am a counselor in the College and Career Center. We have Christina Sapienza, a counselor in Clark House with us tonight, and Danielle Nash, a counselor in Bella House, also here with us tonight. So today we're going to give you an overview of the admissions process, share with you some tips and trends that we've seen recently develop in the admissions process. Keep in mind, this is going to be a lot of information. Tonight is being recorded, so you're welcome to watch this as many times as you like. And so we don't expect you to, by any means, remember everything from tonight, but we do hope that you're going to walk away with at least a sense of excitement about approaching this college research process this winter and spring. Personally, I'm very proud to be part of a highly experienced group of counselors at Greenwich High School. I've been at the high school now roughly 20 years, and many of my colleagues, like Danielle, have been here with me all along, and Christina has been here for a number of years as well. And we all share our own areas of expertise, but we work very much as a team. We meet weekly, we collaborate with each other. We're very fortunate to have the opportunity to attend national conferences, local conferences. We're visiting college campuses all over the country on a regular basis. And because of these networking opportunities that we have with admissions counselors, we share these different levels of experience with each other. But at the end of the day, please be assured that we come to all of you with a high level of experience, and we hope that you will consult with your counselor, listen to your counselor, and really take advantage of all of the resources in our department throughout this process. So after tonight's presentation, the next step will be to set up the junior college conference with your counselor. So that will include parents, typically about an hour-long meeting. You can contact your house counseling assistant anytime over the next few weeks to schedule that meeting when you have it open. And the parents would call the counseling assistant to set that up. And that meeting should take place sometime between now and the end of March. But you might want to call over the next couple of weeks again just to get it on the calendar. Keep in mind this is an initial conference. We always recommend that students make every effort to have follow-up meetings with their counselor and in the College and Career Center throughout this process. So at this college conference is when you will start to develop a preliminary list of colleges, and then we're going to work together through the fall of senior year to really narrow that list. The amount of time that goes into this process or completing the actual applications and essays is independent work, but we are here to help guide you through the process and to really help give you the opportunity to have success in the process. So I'm going to start with just giving a brief overview of a timeline of what to expect over the next year. So again, between now and April, you'll have that initial college meeting. You'll have, and I say at your own pace. Some people are ready to get that meeting on the calendar right away. They're anxious about it. They're just eager. And then other students might not be ready yet, and maybe a little later in the spring might be better. So to schedule that at your own pace. But hopefully by April, you'll have a list of schools. You'll have scheduled several college visits. Personally, I always suggest visiting those target and likely schools first, save the reach schools for a little later in the process. And then right around April or May, it's great for juniors to meet with their counselors to reflect on some of those college visits, especially after April break and February break, and then begin to narrow or maybe broaden their list. It's also a time when you will ask your teachers for recommendations, which we'll talk a little bit later about tonight. And then over the summer is really when you're writing your draft essays, you're completing the actual application. And we have a number of workshops, and we'll be going into counselor advisory throughout the spring to set you up for that. But really over the summer is when you're spending a lot of time, with those draft essays and completing the actual applications. continuing some college visits, obviously fitting in some meaningful experiences, whether it's a job or an internship, community service. But I always tell students not to, overbook their summer, because you really do want to spend a good amount of time writing those essays. And then in September, we have another meeting similar to tonight, but it's really about the nuts and bolts of the application process. So tonight is really an overview. That September meeting is really important for the nuts and bolts. So things like, should I send testing? How do I send test scores? How do I self-report grades? How do I request a transcript? So that webinar is definitely important to attend. And it's also a time when students are meeting individually with their counselors within the first month of school to really narrow their list, make sure they understand the best way to apply to certain schools, whether that's early action or early decision, which we'll touch upon again later, but making sure they have a good set balanced list of schools. And then between October and November is when students are submitting all of their early applications. The majority of our students do apply early, whether it's early action, to at least a handful of schools. And those decisions are typically released in December or January. This is actually a big week for our current seniors. A lot of decisions do come out this week for some early decisions, some early actions, and then other early action schools like Michigan, Wisconsin, even Villanova, Richmond. They release decisions in January. And then January 1st is when regular decision applications are due for the most part, and then those decisions come out a little bit later in March. So the college search process. So I always tell students, think about what your interests are and what's important to you before you start coming up with names of schools. And once you've done some thinking is when you we start developing a list and you start researching. I always also say to use a variety of resources when you're doing your research. So rather than just use one book or one online source, you talk to one student, really use a multiple amount of resources. There's some great college handbooks. I'm still a hard book person. I have a number of books in the College and Career Center that you can take out. The FIS Guide is one of my favorites. I don't have a copy here, but it's like a big green handbook. But students love it. It's from a student's perspective. It's like a quick, easy skim. Virtual information sessions are available on every college website, so going directly to the college websites. There's multiple online resources, but like I said, using a variety of resources. A few tips that I like to give families going through the process. Again, using your resources at GHS, but also it's important to have family discussions at home about college, obviously, but be mindful about how often those conversations take place. You really don't want to have this whole process take over your entire family. So maybe it's finding one night a week. Maybe it's like that Tuesday night where you sit down and talk college over dinner, and then try not to kind of touch the subject the other nights. And use good judgment when you're listening to others. So parents, it's great to talk to parents who have actually been through the process, who have current college students. They'll likely tell you that they wish they didn't stress out so much in the process. And same thing with students. It's great to talk to current college students rather than only their peers who are probably just as overwhelmed as you might be. And finally, be thoughtful and really focus on fit when you're creating your college list. The most selective colleges may not always be the best fit. So we do want this process to be filled with hope. We want to be positive, but we also do need to be realistic about selectivity. So, I always think attitude is everything. So maybe think about getting rid of those preconceived notions of finding that one right college, and have an open mind and be willing to, explore the endless options that are out there. So some factors to think about when creating your list, and these are all things that you're going to talk about in that junior conference. First, I'd like to touch upon location and size. We talk about this a lot as counselors. Most students that we talk to initially want to look at a mid-sized school in or near a city. There's not all that many schools that fit that criteria. And the schools that do, unfortunately, end up being the more selective schools and the schools that most of our students are applying to. So we really challenge students to think beyond those, 15, 20 schools that might fit that criteria, and think about just trying to visit a small school, like looking at a small school, looking at a larger school. Maybe the idea of a large school is intimidating to you. Maybe look at honors programs at schools that are a little less selective at larger state schools that can provide a smaller seminar style classes, like a smaller school feel overall. And then students are often surprised sometimes when they do visit a smaller school. When I say smaller school, like roughly 3,000 students, but sometimes students feel like a small school might not have like the school spirit and the sporty vibe that GHS has. And that's not always the case. There are some schools that have a ton of school spirit and great sports teams, so I think it's important to look at a variety of sizes, especially for your first set of visits. Also thinking about, how much rigor are you looking for when you get to college? There's some schools that are more rigorous academically and other schools that are a little more balanced between social life and academics. I like to tell students to think about both social life on campus and academics equally, because you want to be happy socially, otherwise you're probably not going to do well academically. So think about what you want your social life to look like. Are you looking for Greek life? Do you want to join fraternities and sororities, or do you definitely not want fraternities or sororities? And look into percentage of students that are involved in Greek life on campus. Maybe you do want that sporty vibe, or maybe you could care less about sports and you want more of an academic vibe. But really thinking about kind of that social aspect just as much as the fit academically. When you do know what you want to major in, it can be a little easier to develop your list. So let's just say you're really interested in mechanical engineering. It's kind of easy to come up with a mechanical engineering list. Sometimes it's a little more challenging if you're not sure what you want to study. And that's where we come in as counselors to have those kind of conversations and talk those through. And definitely be having conversations, if you haven't already, about cost. Is cost going to be a factor in this process as a family? Will you be eligible for financial aid? Some of our families are eligible for financial aid, and then other families, cost is definitely a factor, but they may not quite be eligible for aid, and they're going to be really looking for those merit scholarships. Not all colleges have merit scholarships, but many do. And that can help determine schools that are on your list. And that should definitely be something that you bring up to your counselor in that junior conference. But getting those merit scholarships, they really typically come from schools that are going to be a little less selective. So if you're more at the top of the applicant pool, you might be more likely to get some of those merit scholarships. That's really based on your grades and your transcript. So once you've done that preliminary research and then you get out there and visit some schools, again, really try to focus in on those likely and target schools first. It really will take the stress level away from the process if you can identify a couple of those likely target schools that you could really see yourself at. And some general tips: definitely spend as much time as you can on campus rather than rushing through and cramming in multiple visits over the course of a day or two. Really try to spend good quality time on a campus. Eat in the dining hall if you can, spend time in the town, talk to students. We have keep track of an alumni ambassador database. So we poll current JHS alum that are willing to be alumni ambassadors. You can always contact me if you're going to visit a campus and you want to get in touch with a GHS alum and really hear kind of their inside scoop on a specific school. That can be really valuable. I also suggest considering specific college tours. Let's just say you're interested in an honors program. Some colleges will have an honors tour, or if you're interested in College of Engineering, rather than just attend the informational session, also try to attend the College of Engineering info session. Again, talk to even random students. You can try to meet with a professor when you're there, but really taking a full advantage of the time that you're there. It's really those personal visits. You can do a lot online now. There are a lot of every school will have a virtual tour. But sometimes, it's those in-person visits where you have those gut feelings like I could really see myself here or not. Take notes on your visits. The Notes app can be a really valuable resource through this entire process. Trust me, once you visit a handful of schools, they all start blending in and kind of forget, was it this school or that school that I liked this? So definitely get that Notes app and take down some of your impressions. That can also be valuable when you go to write some of your supplemental college essays. Many of those extra essays that some schools require, what they're really looking for is fit between you and the school. So if you can maybe reference a specific building or a student that you talked about or talked to, or again, just impressions overall, those could be things that you could maybe bring into your essays. And so building your college list, so what should that look like? So first of all, as counselors, our goal is to have students become experts on every college that's on their list. Students should be happy to attend every single school on their list, on their final list, especially, or not especially, but including their likely schools. So college lists are going to be long now, and they should be, but eventually they're going to be narrowed to around 10 to 12 schools. We want a couple schools in that likely range, at least 2, and then a couple in the reach range, but most schools should be falling into that high target and target range. So how do you really determine where a college fits into this bell curve? So most importantly, using, sorry, that's not there, using data. So we have 2 platforms that we use at Greenwich High School. One is called SCOIR, SCOIR, and another is called College Kickstart. So both of those programs use Greenwich High School historical data that you will definitely want to familiarize yourself with. I think I'm a little out of order here with my slides, sorry. So let's talk about SCOIR first. So SCOIR can be really valuable in your initial college search and developing your list of schools. And then once you have a list, then College Kickstart can be extremely helpful in balancing your list. So this is what SCOIR looks like in the college search process, or college search engine. So on the left-hand side, you can see you can search for schools based on major, number of students, location, size. I always recommend trying to do an initial college search before you have that junior college meeting, just so you start thinking about things that might be important to you. And this is where the different lists are in SCOIR. So when you have that college meeting with your counselor, your counselor and parents actually can put schools in the suggested column as well. Your counselor will add schools into this column here, and then you will do some research. And if you are liking what you're seeing, you just move those schools into following, or you move them over here into not interested. And then in the fall of next year, if you know you're definitely going to apply to that school, then you move it over here. But you don't worry about that applying list until fall of senior year. So this is really a place to just, house your list. So you keep track of the schools that you're interested in. You can also download it into a spreadsheet up here. The only people that see the schools that are in your list here are your parent, you as a junior, and your counselor. So, SCOIR, the application data, this is the scattergram view, we have 2 years of Greenwich High School data in here, and you can just pull down the year up here. And you can see the test scores and GPA of all the students that have applied to this specific school. This is American University. So if you're in the green, all those students were accepted. The little red is not accepted. The little blue circle there is waitlisted, and then deferred is the little yellow circle. So this could be a nice visual to see where you fall in the applicant pool over the last couple of years from American University. And so SCOIR is really where you should be working right now. Again, you're developing your list in SCOIR. You're creating that list in your suggested and following column and working with your counselor through that. Thinking ahead, you will also just jumped ahead too far here. We will be sending your application documents through SCORE. So that's how we send your transcript and letters of recommendations to colleges. Again, we'll talk more about that in the fall of senior year, but just know that those are sent through SCORE. So all juniors should have a SCORE account. If for some reason a junior doesn't, they can ask their counselor to resend the invitation, but I would imagine most juniors are on SCORE already. Parents should also have their own SCORE account. So we did send an invitation to all parents with SCORE. We sent it only to parents that didn't have a SCORE account already. So first, I would go to score.com as a parent, try to log in. You probably logged in at some point last year or maybe even the year before, and you might not remember. You can use the reset password if you need to. And let's just say you don't have an account. Search your email for SCORE. You might see the invitation in there. Worst case scenario, you don't see the email. You can ask your student to invite you from their profile. So students can just click on invite parent, they type in the email address, and then you'll get a link. So it's pretty simple. But it is helpful for parents to have access to SCORE so they can see what their student sees. So let's talk about College Kickstart now. So most students are starting to use College Kickstart a little later in the spring. However, it is available to juniors right now. So I did send an invitation out to all juniors today. So if juniors check their email, that's another very important tip in this process, by the way, is check your email, check your emails. Very valuable. So in your email, you'll see a welcome to College Kickstart, and you can click on that. Very easy to get in. And I'm just going to show you a couple slides of what this Kickstart looks like. So it's similar to SCORE. Kickstart uses historical data from Greenwich High School from the past 2 years. It's an excellent tool to help students determine the selectivity of colleges as a student coming from GHS. But it also is really helpful in getting students organized with the process a little later and keeping track of application requirements. So students can run their college list in Kickstart and they actually get a grade, as you can see right here. 80% of lists start out too aggressive. So don't be discouraged if you start off with a D or an F on your list. The goal is to get you in that B range, and A is even better. But usually most students are going to need more likelies, more targets to get into that B range initially. It's also important to think about how you're going to apply to the colleges. And again, this is what you'll be discussing with your counselor throughout the process. Early decision is binding, but the acceptance rate can be significantly higher at some schools. Not all colleges have early decision, some do, but it is binding. So if you get accepted, you're going. Some students need to compare merit scholarships from different schools, and early decision might not be the best option. And, for other students, it can be a very good option. So College Kickstart is a great way to look at, and you can also look at data in SCORE as well, of how students applied. So it'll tell you if a student applied ED or early action. So that's definitely valuable. So, and again, in addition to looking at the selectivity, these are the application process, the requirements. So this is a student's list in here, and it gives you direct links to the college website. So Colorado College, it tells you their standardized testing plan. If I click on flexible, it'll take me directly to the Colorado College website, right to the page on standardized testing. Same thing as what's required for recommendations. Does the school interview, what the essays are. So it's a great way to get organized. So we always recommend really looking at this like late spring. And then another excellent tool is thinking about affordability. So you can see the average merit scholarship here at Colorado College, the percentage of students that receive financial aid, the net cost, and again, direct links to if there's an additional application to apply for a merit scholarship, it'll take you right to that page. So, so again, this is a little later in the spring, but can definitely be helpful on College Kickstart. So those are the two platforms, again, College Kickstart and SCORE. to help really look at the data and determining selectivity. But I will say nothing replaces the advice that your counselor will give you. So this is you're just looking at GPA and testing. There's a lot more that goes into this process. So for example, selectivity of major can be a really big deal. Kickstart can be helpful in looking at some majors, but it's not, it's not including all majors at all schools. So, and then, there's certainly a lot of other factors like students are recruited for athletics and legacy and demonstrated interest, which we'll touch upon later. But counselors are experienced in all of that. So really listening to your counselor in terms of, is this a target school or a reach school in addition to using the data? And then finally, before I turn it over to Danielle, we also put out this college book here every year. I don't know if you can see this, maybe not, but it's like basically it's a printed out copy of the previous year's stats. We did, the PTA did do a fundraiser and sold them. I believe they're still selling them. There's copies in the media center for juniors to take out or look at while they're in the media center. But most families love looking at like a hard copy and kind of where students fell from the year before. So now we're going to get into the factors that are considered in the application process, and I'll turn it over to you, Danielle.
Thanks, Allison. All right, so the first thing that the colleges are going to be looking at are the academic factors. And the number one thing under the academic factors is going to be the transcript. And a lot of times when I am talking to students starting the process, they're just jumping and talking about specifically the GPA. But we're really talking about the transcript as a whole and everything that's on that transcript. So that goes all the way back to course selection and the rigor of classes that students have taken. And that includes senior year courses. So when the counselors meet with students in February and March to do next year's course selection, we really might be pushing students to challenge themselves a little bit in the a little bit more in the senior year than sometimes the kids want to. A lot of times the kids come in and they want to take it a little bit easier in senior year because they've been working so hard for the last 3 years. But senior year is certainly not a time to take their foot off the gas pedal when it comes to thinking about the level of rigor that's on their in their courses. And then obviously they are looking at the individual course grades. Depending on what major a student is looking at, some students might be applying to a humanities-based major, in which case the colleges may be focusing on those humanities courses. If you're applying as a STEM major, then obviously they're going to be looking more closely at the math and the science grades. Of course, if you're applying to highly selective schools, then they're looking at all of your grades, no matter what your when the kids are submitting their applications, a lot of times the schools might require first quarter grades, but even if they don't require first quarter grades, even if the kids are applying early action or early decision, we encourage them to submit those first quarter grades if they're having a great first quarter. And so that's certainly something the kids can discuss individually with their own counselor if they're trying to make a decision about whether or not to send those first quarter grades. But when January and February roll around and we wrap up the first semester, Greenwich High School will automatically be sending those mid-year grades to all of the colleges that the kids have applied to. So even if they got into their ED school, we'll be sending the mid-year grades. So again, even once the kids have their acceptance, you don't want to let that senioritis settle in too quickly because the colleges will be having a little check-in on the kids' grades in January and February. Certainly, if you've got regular decision applications out there, you want to make sure that you're continuing to work hard. So when the colleges get those grades, they're seeing, your best foot forward, continuing to work hard. All right, so then moving on, beyond the transcript, we're also looking at testing. And testing is obviously a hot topic these days in this sort of post-pandemic world, if that's what we're calling it. So many of the colleges have continued to remain test optional. We'll look at another slide with information about that in a minute. But for students, everybody is going to be taking the SAT in school on Wednesday, March 20th. It's going to be the digital SAT, and that is really used as a graduation or state of Connecticut requirement to look at mastery-based learning. But it's also a great opportunity to get that first run at the SATs for a lot of our students, and decide whether or not you are going to use testing as a part of your application process based on the scores that you get on that school day testing. A lot of the test prep companies will also offer free practice tests. Some of our juniors may have taken the practice ACT at Greenwich High School just a couple of weeks ago. But if you want to do additional practice tests, again, a lot of the test prep companies will give kids the opportunity to do that. When you're deciding whether or not to send your test scores as part of the application process, you want to look to see if your scores at least fall within or above the middle 50 to 75% range for the colleges that the students are sending them to. Kickstart and the college's own websites can certainly be a good place to get some of this data. We do know that for many schools, if you have scores that colleges are looking for, then kids that submit scores are admitting at a higher rate. But that's not, oh, I should just submit my test scores no matter what they are, because kids who submit scores admit at a higher rate. So it's really something to look very carefully at for each individual student and each specific school that they're applying to. So for some of my kids this year, they sent their schools to sent scores to some of the colleges they were applying to, but not to others. So even for a single student, it's a college by college decision. So we can look at this next slide to get a sense of how many schools are still looking at test optional. I was talking to one family the other day who said they just, a school that their child was looking at had just announced that they would definitely be test optional for the class of 2025. So some schools are still like in that test optional temporary category that you're seeing there in the turquoise, which is one of the largest categories. Personally, I think the test optional is here to stay. So even for the colleges that are staying in that temporary category, it seems, they've already started to announce that they're going to continue for one more year. And a lot of them, as you can see again on this graph, the other second largest category is that the schools are permanently test optional. And that's really been not just a growing trend from the pandemic, but like Allison said, I've been at Greenwich High School for 21 years, and that number of schools that are test optional every year throughout my entire career has grown. Fairtest.org is an awesome website to take a look at to see which schools are test optional. I'm kind of all in one place, in addition to being able to get some of that information from College Kickstart. So then beyond sort of the numbers are the personal factors that colleges are looking at when they're reviewing student applications. And right up at the top is the college essay. I tell students, again, in this test optional world, the college essay has really, I think, grown in importance in the last handful of years. Not that it wasn't always important, but I think even more so lately. So it's really important for kids to spend good quality time being thoughtful with their essay, really trying to think critically about, is this essay showing off my strengths that are going to make me an attractive candidate to the colleges that I'm applying to. And like Allison said, spending time in the summer really dedicated to crafting that essay, working through different drafts, so that the kids can really feel like they're putting their best foot forward. By the even by now, at this point in December of junior year, the vast majority of your grades are already set. Obviously, testing is still in your control at this stage of the game, but the essay is really your opportunity to give voice to your application so that the colleges can really get to know who you are and would you be a good student for their college. Allison talked a little bit earlier about that fit. More and more schools are looking to see and craft a class with students that they think will be a good fit, will be contributing members of their campus community. Then you want to think carefully about letters of recommendation. I'll talk a little bit in a minute about what goes into those teacher letters of recommendation, how to think about those, and the counselor letter. So I'll put a little pause on that for a second. Then the colleges are looking at demographics, right? So they're looking at how many students from Greenwich High School applied. So to some, as Allison mentioned, right, there's only a handful of schools that fit that like most desired college of in or near an urban environment in that mid-size category, right? But nobody wants 50 students on their college campus, all from Greenwich High School. They really are trying to diversify where their students are coming from. So in some respect, the kids are competing against each other. So again, we encourage students to really think a little bit outside the box. Can they add some schools onto their list that not everybody from Greenwich High School is applying to? For the schools that the kids do decide that they're going to apply to, that demonstrated interest, again, for many schools, can be an important factor. Again, College Kickstart will easily tell the kids which schools are tracking that demonstrated interest. But when you're still at this research stage of things, as you're going to visit the college campuses, I always suggest you register for the tour and information session ahead of time. If you are just doing a drive-by, stop into the admissions office, ask the counselor on duty for the day if they've got 5 minutes to answer a question, or stop into the admissions office and ask if they look at demonstrated interest, and can you fill out an information card so that they know you were there on campus for that day. But definitely taking notes, taking pictures even of the schools that you're visiting, because if you go out over February vacation or April vacation and you're visiting a whole bunch of schools, or even if you take a Friday off and you're visiting a couple of schools on Friday and a couple of schools on Saturday, they will start to blend together. So those pictures and those notes can help students keep straight in their mind what they liked about specific schools, so that if they do need to write one of those Why My College essays, they'll be well prepared with information that they can talk about in those essays. Other personal factors are going to be those extracurricular activities. Again, this is something else that students certainly still have in their control. If your activities have been a little bit light, there's no time like the present to jump on the Greenwich High School website, take a look at all the different clubs and organizations that we have to offer that students can get involved in. Students are welcome to join any of our clubs at any point in the year. So it's not too late to join something even for this year. Taking on leadership roles for senior year, if you're able to, definitely also helps. But those extracurricular activities can also be out in the community. It could be volunteering at Neighbor to Neighbor, Kids Helping Kids, a Boys and Girls Club. There's lots of wonderful organizations in the community where kids can volunteer, or that you might be involved with, from a personal growth standpoint, things like that. Then interviews during that application process. Some schools will allow students to do an interview. It might be an interview with a student that goes to school on that campus. It might be with an admissions counselor who works in the admissions office, or it could be an alumni interview. I personally recommend that my students take advantage of the opportunity for an interview anytime they get it, no matter who it's with. Because again, similarly to the essay, it's an opportunity to really sell yourself, to make a personal connection with someone. so that you can really give a little bit more depth to your application and let that school get to know you a little bit more. Even when schools say it's a non-evaluative essay, I still think if you're making a personal connection with someone in the admissions office, it's easier for them to go to bat for you and argue, in committee why they think you should be a student at their particular school. Moving down our list, are the legacy status. So where parents went to school or siblings went to school, this is a factor for some schools, but certainly not all schools. And obviously, you have a limited number of places that you can be a legacy. So don't stress too much about that if you don't have those legacy connections. And again, your school counselor can talk individually with you about any particular school and how much that may or may not help you. And then moving down to the supplements, and just like the main college essay, the supplements again are an opportunity to help a student stand out. They really are key in helping the colleges look at fit. With the college admissions, Supreme Court decision that came out earlier this year, more schools than ever have added those supplemental questions to help them really hone in on who are going to be the good fits for their particular college. So some schools that I never would have imagined have supplemental essays. And they're certainly not anything to take less seriously. So that's where, again, Allison talked about really trying to use the summer to get a jump start. We often will both tell students to use July as an opportunity to finish up your main essay and August as a time to really get a good jump start on as many supplemental essays as a student can get done in that August timeframe before senior year kicks off and the kids are busy and, keeping up with their classes so they can get the best senior year grades as possible. But so certainly those supplements are something to be thinking about and allotting time for. And then finally, in the admissions process, for some students, these like special talents might weigh a factor in a student's acceptability, right? So some of our students are lucky enough to be recruited athletes. A lot of people will see the pictures that we put of our D1 accepted athletes. Later in the spring, we'll have a special ceremony for our D3 accepted athletes. I know I had an opportunity to work this fall with a student who was being recruited because of her artistic talent. Lots of our music and theater students might be participating in auditions where they're trying out with music departments and theater departments. So again, those factors can also certainly weigh in to a student's admissibility at schools if they're applying to those particular programs. All right, so moving on, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Common Application. So for those of you who are working on those of you who are juniors or have parents, for those of you that this is your first child going through the application process, the Common Application is a wonderful tool for our students to be able to utilize. The vast majority of the schools that students will apply to are on the Common Application at this stage of the game. So we recommend later in the spring, in May or June, it's a great time to create your Common Application. If you create it in May or June, when the Common Application for the class of 25 goes live on August 1st, you'll be able to roll your application data into that new year's application. And the Common Application is great because it means less time that you have to enter name, address, phone number. Where do you go to school? What classes are you taking? Where did your mom go to school? Where did your dad go to school? It has the activities list. And so you're able to list up to 10 activities that you've been a part of. And you want to be really succinct in those descriptions. You're limited to only 150 characters. But again, it's only one time with the Common Application that you're entering all of this information. So that's a great tool. Once you're into the application, then you're going to add your schools once the Common App goes live in any time from that August 1st date beyond. And the kids will be able to add their schools. The colleges will have college specific questions that the kids can answer. Some schools will use the Common Application as an opportunity for the kids to put their self-reported grades and their self-reported testing in there. And again, for that testing information, some schools will take the self-reported testing and you don't need to send the scores directly from ACT or the College Board. But even if you self-report, some schools will require official score reports be sent by the testing agencies. So students have to be really careful and thorough in knowing who takes the self-reported test scores, who needs them directly from the testing agency, who's taking those self-reported grades from the Common Application, who needs the transcript sent from Greenwich High School. And then some schools are using a third-party website called the Self-Reported Academic Record. And so then students are creating accounts and entering their courses and grades into that, that self-reported academic record. And they'll be linking that self-reported academic record up to the portal at those schools that are using that third-party place. As I talked about earlier, that personal essay, right, it does have a 650 word limit. I hadn't mentioned that earlier. The prompts are generally announced in March. For the last couple of years, those questions haven't changed. So often many of them will stay the same, but the students will be able to see those questions at some point in March. So if they wanted to start doing any kind of brainstorming or even just letting ideas roll around and percolate in their mind before they sit down and start to think about those. Those supplemental essays definitely won't be available until that August 1st application release deadline. And so we've kind of talked about those. There are other applications that are available. SCORE itself does have an application that students can utilize if they'd like to. Some colleges have college-specific applications. Georgetown and MIT are examples of that. The University of California as a system has its own application. So students that are applying to these particular schools and perhaps a couple of other ones as well, but these are the main three that our kids are applying to that have school-specific applications. All right. So then getting back to that counselor letter of recommendation, right? So all of the counselors at Greenwich High School are going to write letters of recommendation for our students. We pride ourselves in writing really thoughtful, individualized letters that come out of our relationships that we had with our students. For most of our students, we've had those relationships for freshman, sophomore, and junior year. Obviously, for transfer students, we might not have quite as much time. So I always say to my kids, like, I know you as I've had a chance to get to know you. But the senior brag sheet or the student brag sheet is an opportunity for the kids to really think about things that they've done that they want to share with me, ideas that they have about what's been meaningful to them throughout their high school experience. And the more time and the more thoughtful that they are with those senior brag sheets, the more information you're giving to your counselor so that we can really write those careful letters of recommendation and include some details about you and things you've done and things that are important to you that we might not otherwise know about. And as part of that brag sheet, there is a student activity section that the students can complete. But if they have already created a resume, which we certainly encourage them to do, then they can certainly share their resume with us in lieu of that activity sheet that's attached to the brag sheet. Excuse me. And then some colleges will actually allow students to upload a resume as part of the application. Again, the resume might be a more detailed accounting of what the students are involved in, what kinds of activities go on within certain clubs and organizations that they might be a part of that might not otherwise fit in that tiny little 150 character space that they get on the Common Application. So this is information that the kids themselves are going to share with their counselor in order to help us with our letters of recommendation. Then we also ask parents to complete a parent brag sheet for us. Again, this is an opportunity to really brag on your kids, share with us what you see as your children's strengths, their accomplishments, how you describe your kids to us. And again, I always get great feedback from parents. On every student, I get something from parents that I'm able to tie in and include in my letter of recommendation in some way or another. So we really appreciate, really thoughtful parent brag sheets. Then next on the list here are informal comments. And we like to have at least 2 of these, preferably one from a teacher. This is not your formal letter of recommendation from a teacher that I'm going to talk about on the next slide. This is sort of like the third teacher. If you were going to ask 3 teachers, who would that third teacher be? And you can ask them to share these informal comments with us. So when your counselor is talking about, you as a student, the counselors are able to oftentimes include a little quote. And Mrs. Smith has had Sarah in her class, and she says, Sarah, blah, 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 blah. Some really nice strength that Sarah is demonstrating in that teacher's classroom. So it brings in just a little bit of a flavor of that teacher feedback. And likewise, that second informal can come from a club advisor, an employer, a coach. I always say somebody that knows you well, that's not a family member, that knows you outside of your school activities. Or your classroom activities rather. So sometimes I get letters from people that kids have babysat for. I get a number of coach letters every year, a number of club advisor letters every year. So again, these just provide great insight. So if we're talking about how a student has been a soccer player all throughout high school and what their development as a player is like, the student might talk about how important soccer has been to them. But then for me to be able to tie in, here's what their coach had to say about them and how they're really a leader on the field and how they've worked so hard to grow as a player can be so valuable for us to be able to share. And then the last component that counselors take is an optional peer recommendation. I really do encourage kids to ask their friends to think about doing these peer recommendations. I've heard from a number of colleges that they really do appreciate that peer feedback. It's a unique perspective that your peers have to share information on what they see as their friends' strengths and best qualities. And so counselors, again, appreciate being able to tie this in to that letter of recommendation when we're pulling that together. Even though it's a letter of recommendation, I always call it like a narrative story about who the student is. And it really just gives us a chance to highlight and help a student shine in the application process. So that's why we're looking for all this input from all these different people. And that's what I think makes the counselor letter so unique and special. And again, like Allison said, I am so happy to be able to work with such a talented group of school counselors at Greenwich High School who I know all take these letters of recommendation very seriously. And then the teacher letters of recommendation, of course, are equally important, but they're also very different. So the teacher's letters of recommendation, you only want to ask either 1 or 2 teachers to write a letter of recommendation for you. I highly recommend that you ask a teacher that you've had in your junior year, because the junior year is that most important year. So to be able to hear from a teacher that's working with you this year is really going to be the most reflective. Okay. Depending on what you're thinking about, for courses for senior year, if you're planning to register for a course that your favorite teacher from freshman year also teaches, and you're hoping that you might get that teacher again, then sometimes it's okay to wait to ask one teacher, but definitely at least lock one teacher up in the springtime, so that you've got at least one teacher committed. Some colleges will ask students to have one teacher from the humanities area and one teacher from the STEM area. But again, that's going to be a little bit individualized. It's certainly not a bad strategy to go with, but sometimes I have students who really, want one English and one social studies, or one English and a world language teacher. So again, you have to look at the colleges that you're applying to and whether or not they have specific requirements. You can certainly talk to your school counselor. If you're applying to an engineering program or to a business program, you would definitely want to have a STEM teacher. But if you were thinking you wanted to ask two humanities teachers, then maybe that's where a good conversation needs to come in, so that you can be thoughtful about, who you want to ask to write those letters of recommendation. And when you come in for that junior college conference with your school counselor, we're happy to talk about your ideas of which teachers you're thinking about asking, so that we can have some insight and give you any guidance, on what we think based on the teachers you're thinking about, the major you're thinking about, the colleges you're looking at. So that, can be really important. On our website, there is a formal recommendation form for teachers. You want these teacher letters to really be reflective of what you do in that teacher's classroom. So we want teachers to really be talking about, what your writing skills are like, what your analytic skills are like. Are you a classroom leader? Are you a group leader? If your teacher puts you in a group, they know you're always going to jump in and get the ball rolling for any group that they might put you in. And so the formal teacher recommendation form that's on there really asks students to think critically about what you enjoyed most in this teacher's class. Was there a project? Was there a unit assessment where you thought you really showed your best skills and talents, that you really enjoyed, that you really grew from? Because then this makes it really easy for the teachers to talk about that specific assignment and demonstrate those good student skills in their letters of recommendation. Some teachers have their own forms that they will ask for, which is certainly their prerogative. But if teachers aren't asking students for a form and they're just going to write it based on their experience, I really suggest, and I know most of our school counselors do, that kids really think about utilizing this optional form, to give, once your teacher said yes, fill that out and give them to, thanks so much, Mr. Smith, for agreeing to write my letter. I completed the teacher recommendation form that's on the Greenwich High School website, and I wanted to make sure to share it with you. So
Just to add to that, Danielle, sorry to interrupt, but these slides will be sent out with the recording, and there are links that take you directly to all the forms, the brag sheets and everything on our website.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Allison. Yeah, so hopefully this gives you probably a little more information than you even needed, because I always talk a lot, but hopefully that gives you some good ideas about what the colleges are going to be looking for. And now I'm going to turn it over to Christina.
Thank you. Sorry, I have a little bit of laryngitis, so I apologize in advance if my voice goes out. The role of the student. So my section is essentially going to recap a lot of what counselors have been saying. We want students to take ownership of this process. Students need to be the leaders of this process. Students should become experts in every single one of the colleges that are on their list and be the driver of their college process, just like Mrs. Lockridge and Mrs. Nash have said. As a student, you should be aware of your deadlines. You should be interested in attending all of the schools that you have on your list, even your likelies. Students should have lists that consist of targets, they consist of reaches, they consist of the likely schools. So schools that are exactly where you are, those are your targets. Reaches are slightly above the levels that you are. So maybe the average GPA is a little bit higher than what your current cumulative GPA is. And then the likelies are the schools that are a little bit easier, or quote unquote easier for you to get in than some of the other schools. So your GPA is higher than the average for that school. So we want a well-balanced list. We want to make sure that students are applying to schools that fit what they're looking for. You should have an idea of what you're looking for at a school. So that's why that school list starts off so large. And that's how we wind it down to the list that is between that 10 to 12 schools that Mrs. Lockridge was sharing. Beyond that, we want to make sure that students are applying to their colleges. They're completing the applications by the deadline dates. If your college deadline is November 1st, you're sending out that application by November 1st. We want to make sure that students are creating usernames and passwords for whichever portals they need to have access to. We want to make sure that students are sending their standardized test scores to the schools that don't allow you to just simply self-report. Some colleges want you to go to ACT or SAT and College Board to send the scores off to the schools, as opposed to just self-reporting via your common application. Make sure that the teachers who are writing your formal letters of recommendation, make sure they have whatever information they need prior to your actual internal deadline. So make sure that your formal letter of recommendation writer, if you ask them in May, make sure that by June, if they ask you to fill out a form or send them an email, if they have a deadline date, you are meeting that deadline date before the actual deadlines that they give you. Beyond that, I think it's very important that in the fall of next year, you have a follow-up meeting with your counselor. A lot happens throughout this process. If you have your meeting with your school counselor in December, maybe you want to have a part 2 in April or May, and then you want to have a follow-up meeting in September to say, this is my finalized list, we're good. So it's really important that you are following all of these things. Also on SCORE, since SCORE is a platform that we use to send all of your information to the colleges, it's really important to make sure that the schools that you're legitimately applying to are in the applying section of SCORE. That's for the fall. However, we want to make sure that you know this ahead of time. So what should students not do? This cartoon on the bottom is truthfully how school counselors can feel by the end of this college process. We come into it and then we're very tired by the end of it. We love this process. We come to this office every single day because we love our jobs, and I can speak for a lot of counselors. The college process is my favorite part of my job. So what not to do, students? Don't change your college list after you've met with your school counselor and said that this is my finalized list in the fall of your senior year. Make sure that the chatter, there's a lot of chatter. Students talk a lot to each other. Make sure that what all your friends are saying don't derail you from where you are. It's really important to be comfortable and confident with your list, and that when you have a finalized list and your counselor gives you their blessing on it, make sure that you're not going to go off and change it and go in a completely opposite direction. Make sure that you're not making subtle changes to your list by changing things to your applying section only 2 days before the actual college deadline. We make sure that we send everything out for you to your colleges. So if you're not having everything in that applying section, we may not recognize that that's what you just changed. So don't be making changes to your applying to section without talking to your school counselor ahead of time. We really like to be kept in the know, and that's not because we're trying to be difficult. We just want to know where you are in all of this. Make sure you're giving your teachers the time that they need to write their letters. Don't say, I need it by the end of the week. Make sure you give them their time. Letters of recommendation are a labor of love. We love writing them, but they take time. Don't have a college list that only consists of reach and far reach schools. And don't apply only to the schools that your friends are applying to. Make sure that your list is the list of schools that you really want to go to, regardless of who else ends up there. The role of the parents. So students and parents are in this together. We're in this with every single one of you. It's important that students and parents have involvement, but that students are driving this process. Parents, we've all had our college process. We've all had some form of an experience that have brought us to where we are today. We all have dreams and aspirations for our children, but we want to make sure that we're working together overall. So this is a nice little chart that we like to share with students and families of what parents feel, what students feel. We like equal involvement. So the role of parents. Please be open to new ideas and suggestions on colleges to consider. There may be schools that we recommend to you all that you've never heard of, and we just ask that you take a look at them. Take a look, because we're not suggesting it for no reason at all. We're suggesting it because there's good reason why we feel this is a good fit for you and your family. We'd also like for you to have early, candid conversations about any financial parameters. Every single college has something called the net price calculator. The net price calculator does not save your information, but it will give you an idea of what the college is going to cost you and your family. This is really important to keep in mind. There are a lot of times that students and families will actually not have that conversation until senior year when a student has a finalized list, and then we have to rework that list. So very important to start talking about that now. That way everybody's on the same page. It's also really important to support and encourage your children or child. Offer advice and guidance when it's appropriate. Maybe a Sunday night meeting is really what is best, or that Tuesday night meeting like Mrs. Lockridge was saying. But try not to make everything about college right now. It's a stressful time. I get it. We've all been there. We've all gone through it. But it doesn't need to be more stressful because you're having the same conversation every single night. Please be aware of your own biases or preferences regarding colleges. If your student is applying to your alma mater's like arch rival school, please take that with a grain of salt. Still go on that college tour maybe. Try to hold that feeling of why are you applying to the rival, and try to go into it with an open mind. It's really important for everybody, students and parents, to go into this process with an ethical approach to the admissions process. What we mean by that is that it's important to try to take this all in and not feel that you have to go to any lengths where maybe it's not the right way to go about it. As counselors, we are here to support you all. We're here to support your children. We assure you that if something is uncomfortable or there's something that you're not really sure about, I'm sure we've all have had a similar experience where we can help you out with it. Your children are expected to complete their own applications. They can sit down with their school counselors or with Mrs. Lockridge, and we're more than happy to go through every single step of the process with your students. So we don't want you to feel like you're on an island on your own after this conference or after this meeting. We're here every single step of the way as counselors. But it's also important to maintain boundaries and keep that list. If you have your 12 to 15 schools, it's important to not all of a sudden decide that you're applying to 10 more schools. It's really important to try to keep everything within whatever boundaries you have set from the very beginning. So beyond the information in the role of parents, it's important to make sure that with the admissions process, you make sure that your student is completing the applications, the essays, the supplements. This is their voice and their time to show the colleges what a viable candidate they are, okay? Did we lose Allison?
Hopefully, it seemed like she had a couple of minutes where her internet might have been flaking in and out.
Okay.
John talking about the role of the parents, Christina?
Yeah.
You want me
Well,
to-
I was just finished with the role of the parent. So I'm going to move on to what's yeah, I can't share my screen. Okay. So in regards to what is expected of counselors, as counselors, please know that we're here to support you and your students throughout the entire college process. We will work to offer student suggestions and guidance based around the colleges that they're applying to and based on the information that they provide us, whether it be through the game plan survey that we have or through the information and the preferences that they share with us. Beyond that, we work to offer students support in developing well-balanced lists of school and ensuring that it's realistic. This is why we have SCORE. This is why we have Kickstart. This is all the information that we use in order to ensure that students and families have the best list and the best opportunity. We want for students to get into every single school on their list. We work hard to make sure that students have well-crafted lists with the enough likelies, enough targets, and enough reaches. What's critically important is that to keep in mind, while students may have the academic rigor or the qualifications, if it is a highly selective school, which a lot of schools tend to be, it's important to know that it's incredibly more challenging to be accepted regardless of a student's resume, regardless of their academics or their standardized test scores. So this is just something for you all to know. It doesn't mean that it's just one specific student that is experiencing this difficulty. This is something that we see a lot. Beyond that, as school counselors, we're here to write the letter of recommendation. Like I said earlier, it is a labor of love, but it's something we truly enjoy doing. One of the benefits of our job in following families and having students on our caseload many years, but to get to know who they are, what they've encountered over their years. Granted, we have the brag sheet and we have the parent brag sheet and the student brag sheet, but all of this information really helps us. So I want to make sure that you all know that as counselors, we're in this with you. This is a partnership. Communication is key. And with all of that, so long as a student has met all of our office deadlines, so for example, transcript requests are due to us by October 1st for our November 1st deadlines, or any early action or any early decision deadlines. As long as your student has met our deadline dates, which we will give you in the fall, we will send everything out by your student's deadline date, if not before. So our office deadlines do slightly differ from the actual college deadlines. Your student is responsible for submitting the application by the deadline. We're also responsible for getting our stuff in by the deadline, so long as your student has met our deadline dates for the office. So I'm guessing the next steps is really the next part.
So there was 2 last slides. Allison apologizes. She's not sure what happened. She got kicked out and she isn't able to log back in. So luckily we're at the very end of the presentation. We had a slide that you'll see when Allison sends those out on the College and Career Center specifically. So Greenwich High School students are so lucky that the town of Greenwich has recognized the priority of the college application process for our students. So Allison Lockridge, as our College and Career Center counselor, is really a bonus, sort of like a private college counselor that all students have access to at Greenwich High School. In the spring, she prioritizes her time for juniors, as well as running our senior internship program. And in the fall, she prioritizes her time with our seniors. So kids can make individual appointments with Allison. She does ask that the kids and or parents have had their initial meeting with their own school counselor before they come to meet with her, so that she's like that bonus resource and not the first person that that you're meeting with. She also does a number of workshops and presentations, and she also hosts all of our college visitors. So in the fall, we have lots of college reps who come visit Greenwich High School. We encourage kids to take advantage of going to these meetings. Again, we'll talk more about that with the kids in the fall. But Allison will be doing an essay writing workshop for students in the springtime, so that they feel, well positioned to be able to strike off on their own and get started on those college essays. She'll do workshops on list development and getting ready for college visits and interviews. So definitely, keep reading. She and the assistant up in the Career Center put out the college and career update. So you probably get the emails from them. That's a great thing to start reading from now moving forward until you're finished with the application process. And then, as she mentioned, they also publish the GHS College Book. And I know she mentioned the PTA has that as a fundraiser, but you can also come up to the media center and borrow that book as well. So you don't necessarily have to purchase it if you wanted to read it. And then our closing slide was on next steps. So as we said, sort of at the beginning, scheduling your junior college conference, if you haven't already done so. I think I have my first college meeting later this week, because we told our families in Bella, you had to wait for tonight's meeting. And I know some families are anxious to get started on that process. But as Allison said earlier, some students won't be ready to sit down for that conversation until March, April, sometimes even May. So, parents, read your student, figure out what feels like the right timing for your child and your family. But know that as school counselors, we're here and ready to sit down for those junior college conferences when you are. Calling the house school counseling assistant is the best way to set that up. Because our assistants can look at the student schedule, our calendar, and talk to the parents about a time that would work for them, so that we can find a time that works for everybody. Thinking about those college visits that we've talked about today, thinking about that standardized test plan that we've talked about today, the letters of recommendation, and last but not least, keeping those grades up. So those are really, I think everything that we like a little quick, here's the 5-bullet summary of what we talked about tonight. It looks like we have answered all of the questions that were in the chat for tonight. So we really appreciate everyone taking the time to listen to us tonight. And on behalf of all of the school counselors, we really look forward to meeting with everybody for those junior college conference meetings. I'm just saying our goodbyes, Allison, and thank you. We covered all our bullet points. We've answered all the questions. So hopefully this has been helpful for everybody.
I apologize, my internet was completely off. So, but thank you for taking over. And I know it was a little long, but hopefully, hopefully you had some takeaways, and have a wonderful night. And we look forward to meeting with all of you in person.
All right. Thanks,
All right,
everyone.
bye.
Bye.